gia đình mình sẽ đi đi xe lửa một vòng thành phố Ma này nha, để mình khám phá thành phố Ma này như thế nào. Rồi mình sẽ quay lại màn hình nha.
Welcome aboard the western side of Superstition Mountain sitting over there. And on this end, it's a little over 5,000 feet above sea level. And it's the second most photographed spot here in Arizona. Now most geologists agree that that mountain over there was created when a volcano began erupting 25 million years ago. And today, the Superstition Mountain and the mountain range is a federally protected wilderness area covering approximately 250 square miles. Now, being designated a wilderness means no motorized vehicles, no mechanical or electronic equipment, and no prospecting or mining of any kind is allowed within the wilderness boundaries. Now, looking over here to the left, for a few minutes, we have a lot of cactus growing between the tracks and the town. Now first up, we have the large ones, the giant saguaro cactus. They only grow in the Sonoran Desert, can live up to 250 years, and are between 50 to 100 years old when they begin growing their first start. We also have a lot of prickly pear out here. A couple over there by the trees, several on the other side around that small saguaro, and a couple more coming up in the middle. And we have cholla by the tracks, staghorn out there in the middle, buckhorn, and the tall ones coming up are chain-fruit cholla, also known as a jumping cactus. Now looking out the right side of the train, we have some other vegetation that's very common throughout the Southwest. The trees with the green bark, the Palo Verde, and that's Spanish for pale green wood. Now they are members of the conifer tree family. They are like evergreens and don't have leaves. So they store the chlorophyll in the trunk, turning the bark green. An Arizona state tree is the blue Palo Verde. And coming up here on the right, we have some mining equipment set up for you. We have a head frame, muck bucket, and a winch that you'd find on the main shaft of a mine. And we also have the different size ore carts beside that head frame. The small gray one was used down inside the mines to move the ore to the main shaft and get it on the muck bucket. And the larger ones were used to haul it away to some type of processing facility near the mining operations. Now coming up here on the right at the bottom of the hill, we have the old Wasp Gold Mine. Been owned by the same family since 1983, and it was a couple of years later they extracted $500,000 worth of gold out of that large trench at the bottom of that hill. We call that open pit mining. And the depth of the trench varies from 35 to 85 feet deep. Also there on the right, we have a good example of a wooden head frame that was used until 1904, 1905. And then they started disappearing when they began building the head frames out of steel. Now looking out the right side of the train, off into the distance, to the north-northeast of Goldfield about 40 miles, we have four peaks. The tallest mountain in this part of Arizona at a little over 7,600 feet above sea level. Now during an average winter, we will see snow on it 2 or 3 times. But the amazing feature about Four Peaks is up there on its southeast space between peaks number 3 and 4 at 7,200 feet. You're going to be standing at the entrance to North America's only commercially owned and operating amethyst mine. And it does produce some of the finest in the world today. Now there are a couple of shops back here in Goldfield. Got Cary, Port Peaks, Amethyst. You'd like to check it out after the train ride. We have an old air shaft over there on the right. We got more gold mines down there in the desert. Now that old air shaft and the yellow building over there on the other side belonged to the Mammoth Gold Mine. And back in the 1890s, the Mammoth, which is halfway between the fence and the yellow building over there, was the largest and richest mine here in the Goldfield Mining District. It is also the deepest gold mine here in the valley. The main shaft of the Mammoth is a little over 1,000 feet to the bottom. And a little bit farther out there in the desert, north of the Mammoth property, we have a few more gold mines. And their names are Top Thumb, Black Queen, Black King, and the Golden Hillside. Now they began discovering those gold mines out there during the 1880s. And it was business partners, Higgs and Morris from Mesa, that were filing the first gold claims out here. In one of those claims, the Black Queen became one of the significant gold mines during the 1890s. And the main shaft of that mine is located out there in the desert, about a half mile, covered by that metal shed. Now during the 1880s, Higgs and Morris had all this gold to themselves out here for a couple of years because there were still a few hostile Apache in the area. And they were the only ones brave enough at the time to venture out here, gather up their gold, and they hoped they had enough time to look around and find another vein. Now it's a very early 1890s when it was becoming safe enough for other folks to venture out here, discover their own gold mine, and make a fortune. And at that time, there was one mining company set up out here digging that gold out of the ground. Now before I continue with brief history of Goldfield and the gold mining that did go on 127 years ago, grab your cameras and look out the left side of the train. To the east, we have great views of Goldfield Ghost Town with the legendary Superstition Mountain in the background coming up. It was one day back in 1891. Higgs happened to be out here hunting. Got a couple of 100 yards back upstream in the vicinity of the Mammoth gold mine sitting back there in the wash. And he came across a vein of gold that was partially exposed from flash flooding. And that discovery was the one that got the mining town of Goldfield took row out here in the desert. Now a few days after he discovered that vein, one of the local newspaper headlines stated that they discovered the Lost Dutchman gold mine. They just found a very large, very rich body of gold ore in the Goldfield Mining District just west of Superstition Mountain. And folks started moving out here from Phoenix and Mesa. And it didn't take long for the population of Goldfield to exceed them two towns. Now the year was 1893. The mining town of Goldfield was established and incorporated. In October that year, they opened the post office. A couple of years later, during the peak of the gold mining out here in 1895, the town had over 30 businesses and over 30 buildings in it. An estimated 2,500 residents living in the area, with only two And most of them were gold miners and their families living out here in the desert in canvas wall tents. There were a dozen gold mines operating in the area, but only 2 of those were large enough and significant enough back then. We are still talking about them today. Now we go back to the 1880s when it was getting started. Word was spreaded throughout the Southwest that gold was found here in the western Superstition. Paul and Sullivan, mining company from Denver,
Cái này cao
heard
hơn
about
10
gold
mét.
they found out here, came to Arizona in 1886, and they started buying up the claims. And they offered H.N. Morris $20,000 for the claims that they had at the time. And they accepted that mining company's offer. Now, out of the handful of claims Hall and Sullivan ended up with through that purchase, there were 2 that did really well. The first one was a Black Queen between 1887 and 1897. That mine produced $500,000 in gold. And this was back when it was worth $20 an ounce. And the other claim that ended up doing really well for that mining company, found on the other side of the gold field over there, down the hill in the wash, called the Mammoth Gold Mine. And that vein of gold that Higgs discovered did lead to the largest and richest body of gold ore that was ever found out here. It was called the Mormon Stone. And for nearly 2 years, the first several hundred feet of it was producing 300 ounces of gold per ton. There was a 20-stem mill set up over there at Mammoth Mine, processing that ore 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And between 1891 and 1897, total gold production from the Mammoth Mine was 64,000 ounces. It had $20 an ounce. That was a little over $1 million. Not a bad return on that $20,000 investment. Now, the other gold mines out here in the valley under different ownership produced $3 million during that same time period. And Goldfield, like a lot of other mining towns in the Southwest back then, didn't last very long. 1897, the gold's running out, mines were shutting down, and the miners and their families were leaving the area. And the Mammoth, one of the few gold mines that were still operating out here, were finding veins of low-grade ore. And then those mine owners got greedy history. That's usually where you found it before. But this time, their luck runs out. What they found instead was groundwater after cracking into an aquifer. And then a couple of weeks later, the area received 4.5 inches of rain in a very short period of time. Caused a lot of flash flooding out here, did a lot of damage. And the Mammoth Gold Mine being flooded from below and flooded from above with tons of sand and gravel shut down. And the mining company packed it up and headed back to Denver. A couple of months later, with everybody gone from Goldfield, the United States Postal Service officially made it a ghost town when it deactivated the post office in November of 1898, putting an end to the richest era on gold mining here in the Goldfield Mining District. Thank you for riding along the Superstition Scenic Railroad. Please wait till after the train stops. I'll make my way to the back and I'll get it opened up for you.